Hey, Cookies here. It's been quite a while since we've done an updated how to ramp as a discipline priest video, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. So we're going to talk about quite a bit of stuff, so I'll try to break it down as much as I possibly can without over complicating anything. The first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to look at a log, and then I also have a VOD, and they are both from the exact same fight. This is Heroic Lords of Dread that I did in a pug, but we logged it, and then I also have it on video. So we're going to kind of use both as examples and go over some stuff. This is specifically for the 2-minute Kyrian ramp. I will cover the other ones. I think I'm going to cover them kind of each separately, but this is the first one that we're going to cover is the 2-minute Kyrian ramp. All right, so the first thing is we're going to look at the cast sequence in logs itself and then kind of just run through it, answer some questions, and then we'll go over the VOD and look at it again to get a better idea of what we're looking at. Cool. So the first thing is we're going to go to my cast. So we click on me, we go to my cast, and we're going to look at the only casts that matter, which is Evangelism, Boon of the Ascended, Shadow Fiend, and I'm not running a 2-minute Trinket, which ideally I would be with the 2-minute build, but unfortunately I just don't have one. So here's the spells we're looking at, and this is each of our ramps. So we are going to zoom into one of these, and I just have to reset it and at it again. We just want a nice sizable chunk of before and after the ramp, because that is what is going to let us look at the entire thing. And then we're just going to click on timelines up here at the top. We can minimize this event panel because that doesn't matter. And then we're just going to kind of scroll through this until we see where our ramp starts, which is right here, where we see all these power word shields. All right, so how many atonements do you apply when you ramp? Before you press Radiance, how many atonements should you apply? It is generally anywhere between 7 to 10 is a usual good estimate. I would say as many atonements as you can fit into your Rapture is pretty much the good idea. And I'll use the VOD as kind of like a side-by-side comparison here. So when we go into this first ramp here, there is 2 things to consider. First is group size. We have 18 players in this group. So when we double Radiance at the end of our, at the end of our ramp, it is always going to cover 10 players. So if we have 18 players in the group, that means that we only need to apply 8 atonements before we press both our Radiances, because that will cover the entire group, because 10 plus 8 is 18. Cool. So essentially what that means is if you have a 20-player group and you wanted to cover every single person in the entire raid with an atonement for a high V damage ability, you would need to apply 10 atonements before you press your Radiance charges. If you were in a 15-man group, you would only need to apply 5 atonements before you press your 2 Radiances, and so on and so forth. So just make sure that you're not over doing it as far as how many atonements you're applying, because if you apply too many and then use both Radiance charges, you're just wasting atonements that were free from your Radiance. Cool. So we will go back into this and talk about this again. So we have our Shadow Mend. You should always start your ramp with a Shadow Mend. This just helps you apply 1 extra atonement a little bit faster, because your GCD is on cooldown while you're casting. So that means that you don't have a GCD right here in between these 2 casts like you would with these power word shields. So we Shadow Mend, we Rapture, which applies an atonement and a power word shield to the person. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, that's all I'm applying because I have an 18-player group. I'm going to press Radiance on a player who does not have Atonement. It's very important to do this, because if you press Radiance on a player who has Atonement, it will give them an Atonement. So that means it will cancel one of the atonements that Radiance would have normally given. So you need to target a player who does not have an Atonement on them. So using a mouse over macro for this, if you use other mouse overs, is very important. And then we're going to refresh our dot on the boss and then press our other Radiance. Now, why do we refresh our dot in the middle of these 2 Radiances? There's 2 reasons. The first is what you will typically see from a lot of high-end Disc Priest players is they will apply their dot right here, which is totally reasonable, and it works totally fine. So you can do that if you prefer and you don't want to have to refresh in the middle. But what happens is, say we put our dot right here before we start our ramp at 37 seconds. This only lasts 20 seconds, and if we're running Halo or Divine Star, it only lasts 15 seconds, which means that this is only going to last until 57. So if we go to 57, we're still in the middle of our ramp right here, like casting our damage spells, which means that that dot expires in the middle of our big damage window when we have all of our atonements rolling and everything. And if we're running Purge the Wicked. If we're not running Purge the Wicked, it's going to expire like right here at the very start of our ramp before we even get to Schism. So that's why I apply my dot in the middle of the Radiance cast, because then it will last 48 all the way to 68, which is all the way out here when our ramp is already over and done. So that is why I apply my dot right here. The second reason is because, again, when you press Radiance, it's going to apply Atonement to the person that you targeted with Radiance and 4 other nearby players who are injured. So if you, for instance, so we'll look at the ramp here. If you just cast Radiance into Radiance, there's a small but also somewhat likely chance that you will just target somebody because, again, you don't have a global cooldown because it cooled down while you were casting Radiance. So there's a good chance that you're going to target somebody who just got hit by the Radiance atonements, which means now you're going to waste a potential atonement. So what I do is I refresh my dot in between, and that's so that it gives me another global to kind of process the information of who got hit by atonements, and now I can target the right person. So now I can target somebody without atonement with my second Radiance cast. So hopefully that makes sense. That's why I dot in the middle here, and that's why I recommend people doing it. Those are the 2 reasons. All right, so now we back it up again and we kind of walk through it again until we have to ask another question. So 1 atonement, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Radiance, refresh our dot, Radiance again. We're going to press Evangelism. We're going to press Boon of the Ascended, and we're going to blast right away. I'm just going to call this blast, so just be aware as I'm talking through this, this is what blast is. Ascended blast is just, we're just condensing it down to blast. Cool. So our Radiance, refresh dot, Radiance, Evangelism, Boon of the Ascended, immediately blast to get that on cooldown. We're going to Shadow Fiend and Schism, then blast again. And now the goal is to just press a single target priest ability in between each blast. This Nova here, it was an accident, so you can ignore this. So the way it would work is Boon, blast, Shadow Fiend, Schism, blast, Mind Blast, blast, Penance, blast, Solace, blast, and then you should just be spamming smites here at the end. I just fit in a Nova because I had an extra one. I guess what I could have done is like refresh my dot again or something like that. Or found a different spell to cast, but I just had a little bit too much haste because I think I PI'd myself here. So yeah, that would be why. So then you just want to see smite spams until all of your atonements wear off. And this is where I made a mistake, is I started doing like a small ramp already immediately, which if we watch the VOD, when I end my ramp here, I will explain why you want to spam cast smite at the very end. So actually, let's go ahead, since we've already looked at the ramp on logs, let's now rewind it on the VOD and kind of walk through it on the VOD so you guys can see it from both angles. All right, so here our ramp is about to start. Here it is. We have Shadow Mend, Rapture, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Radiance, refresh our dot, Radiance again, Boon of the Ascended, and blast right away. Shadow Fiend, Schism, blast, Mind Blast, blast, Penance, blast, Solace, blast, and then finish it off with something else that you have, and now spam smite. But here's where I make the mistake. See all these active atonements? It's these little pink squares that are on the raid frames. I cast 1 smite, and then, or I cast 2 smites, and then I start Shadow Mending. Right here, when I'm Shadow Mending, there is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 atonements that could be affected by more smites. So it's very important to smite until every single atonement wears off of the raid, because otherwise you're wasting potential healing that could be done with those. I shouldn't start pressing things like Shadow Mend or refreshing atonements on the tanks or anything like that until I use up all of these atonements by spamming smite. So that is the thing that you want to definitely see on like a log or in a VOD, is you want to see more spam smites at the end here. So like these 2 Shadow Mends here should have been smites. So that is the only thing else that needs to be covered. And now we can go ahead and look at our second ramp and just talk through that one now that we know what we're looking at. And this second ramp won't have Shadow Fiend attached to it, so it's slightly different, but it's really, you just take Shadow Fiend out of the equation. So again, we're going to go through here. We're going to find our ramp. There it is. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, And then 8, I just use my 2-piece tier bonus to cast a Shadow Mend at the end rather than a Power Word Shield. Not necessarily what you want to do, but I just wanted to get this used before it expired. So that's 8 atonements. And then Radiance, Refresh Our Dot, Radiance, Evangelism, Boon of the Ascended, Blast, Schism, Blast, Mind Blast, Blast, Penance, Blast, Solace, Blast, and then I use another 2-piece bonus before it expires and Blast. And here we again see the exact same mistake that I kept making, which is something that just I'm noticing now, is I want to be spamming more smites at the end here. So if I go to my second ramp in the VOD, we'll be able to see how much potential I missed out on those smites at the end. So let's go ahead and rewind it to where I started ramping. So here it should be coming up in just a moment. Here we go. Shadow Mend, Rapture 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Radiance, Refresh Our Dot. Radiance again. Boon of the Ascended. Blast, Schism, Blast, Mind Blast, Blast, Penance, Blast, Solace, Blast. Use up our Shadow Men charge from our 2-piece. Blast. And now Smite, and I immediately start Shadow Mending. But again, let's count these atonements. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 atonements. And there's actually one down here too that we use at the end of the ramp. So that's 11 atonements that we are just wasting the end of their durations on. And yes, a lot of them are about to expire, but that's still, even right here, here's another Smite cast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 atonements that we could be getting with another Smite. So it's very, very important to make sure you don't make this mistake and spam Smite until every atonement is worn off, and then start refreshing atonements on people like the tanks or whoever. If the raid needs more healing, you can throw out another Radiance, stuff like that. But it's very, very important to use up all those atonements. All right, awesome. So we covered the ramp. Now let's answer some questions. The first thing that we're going to answer is, when should you be ramping? The best way to check this is just understanding the fights and when damage is going to happen. So for instance, if you've watched my bigwig setup videos, this should help, but I mark my ramp abilities that I need to ramp on, typically with like red or yellow on the cast bar. So you can see there's the AoE phase, which is when Mal'Ganis hits 100% energy. And essentially what you want to be doing is you want to be ramping about 14 seconds before the damage is happening. So 14 seconds before Mal'Ganis starts channeling the AoE on the entire raid, that's when I want to start ramping. So let's just see when I start ramping to see if I time it well. So we're going to start ramping right about here is where the ramp starts. 14 seconds, pretty much spot on. There's 13 seconds left as I'm in the middle of casting this. And then let's see where it lands when I'm done ramping. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We Radiance, we refresh our dot, we Radiance again, and Evangelism, and now we're Boon. And there we go. There's the damage happening. So I would say this ramp is just a tiny bit too early, but the only reason is because the damage that Mal'Ganis does isn't immediate. Like when this timer expires, he doesn't immediately start doing damage. Watch. So the AoE phase has now expired. He starts casting, which is another 3 seconds, and then starts doing damage to the raid. So in this case, you would probably want to start ramping when there's about 10 seconds left on the AoE phase, on this fight in particular. So if we look at this fight, if you want to see it through logs, so you could like use this as an example for other bosses, is you're just going to go to all friendly units. You're going to go to damage taken. You're going to change it to the table so that you can see this stuff. We're going to change the taken by friendly over here on the right to taken from ability, I believe it is. And we're going to find what does the most damage to the raid, right? So in this case, it's going to be, I believe it's Swarm of Darkness is the thing that Mal'Ganis does. Here it is. And you can see that the damage starts at, is this it? Yeah, this definitely is. So you can see that it starts at about 45 seconds and it starts ramping up to right about here. So 50, 53, 55-ish seconds. And then we can zoom in like this. and compare where we pressed our button, because we want evangelism as the majority of the damage is starting to really happen. Some lag on Warcraft logs. But you can basically just use, okay, there it goes. Working out. So yeah. Okay, so there you can see our evangelism is right here at 50, but the damage doesn't really start until about 54 seconds in. So that means we pressed that evangelism about 4 seconds too soon, because you want evangelism right as this damage is kicking in, because that's how you get the most amount of benefit from all those atonements. So again, you can just look at damage taken graphs on bosses and just figure out where those spikes of damage are, and then try to plan it to where you are starting to ramp about 15 to 14 seconds before that damage hits the raid. Again, you can't always just use bigwigs timers, because sometimes the boss has to cast after the timer goes through, so you have to compensate for that kind of stuff. All right, so that's when should we be ramping, about 14 seconds before the actual damage hits the raid. Now, where do we use Divine Star and Halo if we run that talent? Because with 4-piece bonus, and if you're Venthyr, it's very, very good. So I will just talk about it really quick. You essentially just fit it in during your ramp. It doesn't have to be specific. You know, all those abilities that we're casting in between each blast, Ascended Blast, you use it there. So just find an empty spot in there, usually towards like the middle or end. So instead of like using Solace if you can't fit it all in, or like how I had time to fit in an extra ability because I have enough haste for it, that's where you would use things like Divine Star and Halo, is just during that ramp. Okay, and now the last thing we're going to talk about is downtime in between the ramps. So what do you do in the downtime between each of your major ramps? Which is probably the thing that I feel like people struggle with the most, even after they've figured out and done really well with their ramps, is what do you do in between? The first thing I'm going to tell you right now is don't sit there and spam heal people that are taking damage from things, but then not continuing to take damage. So the best example I can give of this is the mindset that you should have. So the mindset that you should have is every time you press Shadow Mend or Power Word Shield on a player, you should be asking yourself, is this player going to be taking damage for the next 15 seconds? If the answer is no, then you should not press Shadow Mend or Power Word Shield on them. If the answer is yes, then they are a great target to press Shadow Mend or Power Word Shield on. As far as Radiance charges, because usually with the 2-minute build, you get like 3, sometimes even 4 casts of Radiance in between each major ramp every 2 minutes. So what you can do is use Radiance for general just raid damage. You can just use like a mini ramp. So like you can see I do one right here. So we see that this little ad is spawned and it's doing damage to the raid. So I apply a couple atonements with Shadow Mend. I apply like 3 or 4 atonements. And then I press Radiance. And then I Schism, Mind Blast, Penance. And it's like a mini ramp. Just think of it that way. Again, all that matters is that you have Schism, Mind Blast, Penance, Boon of the Ascended, and 2 Radiance charges for when Boon of the Ascended comes back off cooldown. So you just need to make sure that you're holding enough time to where you have all those abilities up for when you need to actually major ramp again with all of your abilities up. But in between that, you can feel free to use some Schisms, feel free to use some Mind Blasts, some Radiance charges, all that stuff can be used. Like even at the end here, when we're done with this intermission, I usually Radiance just to kind of top people up. So that's how you can use Radiance. And then that's how you atonement players who will take damage for more than, 10 seconds. They're usually good targets. And you're going to use Radiance charges, Schism, Mind Blast, Penance as like mini ramps in between downtime. So hopefully that makes sense. I just released this VOD like literally yesterday. I posted this and I kind of talked through the ramps and the mini ramps in between and like all the downtime and stuff like that. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have other questions or you need me to go over it more, or what I was thinking is doing another VOD commentary, but instead like talking more in depth about the downtime rather than focusing on the ramps. So expect that in the next few days or something like that. And yeah, hopefully this video was helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.